What would you do if a stranger walked into your office and proved that your entire life was built on a lie? Daniel Morrison thought he knew who he was. A dedicated lawyer, a loving father, a man shaped by the values his parents instilled in him. But when Richard Thornton appears with a folder full of evidence, Daniel's world shatters in an instant. DNA tests, hospital records, and a heartbreaking letter from a mother he never knew reveal a truth so devastating it threatens to destroy everything he holds dear. He wasn't adopted through legal channels. He was stolen as a 3-day-old infant, torn from parents who spent nearly 4 decades searching for him, consumed by grief that destroyed their marriage and their lives. But this isn't just Daniel's tragedy. As he begins to dig deeper, he uncovers something far more sinister. A criminal network that stole dozens of babies and sold them to unsuspecting families. Now Daniel must decide. Does he walk away and protect the life he's built? Or does he risk everything to pursue justice for himself and the countless other families whose lives were shattered by greed? Every document he uncovers brings him closer to the truth, but it also brings him closer to people who thought their crimes were buried forever. This is a story about identity, about the meaning of family, and about one man's relentless fight to reclaim a past that was stolen from him. Follow our channel to see how this incredible journey unfolds. Like this story and comment below telling us where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Morrison & Associates law firm as Daniel Morrison pulled into his reserved spot. At 42, he had built a respectable career defending those who couldn't afford justice, a path that had earned him respect in the community but little wealth. His silver sedan, 8 years old and showing it, stood in stark contrast to the sleek vehicles belonging to the corporate lawyers who rented offices in the adjacent building. Daniel gathered his worn leather briefcase and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. His mind was already running through the day's cases. A custody battle that would break his heart regardless of the outcome, a wrongful termination suit against a local factory, and an eviction defense that seemed increasingly hopeless. This was the work that filled his days. Important work, necessary work, but work that rarely made headlines or fortunes. As he approached the building's entrance, something made him pause. A man stood near the glass doors, partially obscured by the morning shadows. He was tall, perhaps in his late 60s, with silver hair and a posture that spoke of military discipline or years of executive authority. The stranger wore an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly mortgage payment, and he held a manila folder with the careful attention one might give to something precious. Their eyes met, and Daniel felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. The man's gaze was intense, searching, as if he were trying to peer into Daniel's very soul. There was something familiar about him, something that tugged at the edges of Daniel's memory like a half-remembered dream. "Daniel Morrison?" the man asked, his voice deep and controlled, carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. He paused, his hand trembling slightly as he placed it on the folder. 3 months ago, one of the investigators I've kept on retainer all these years found something. A lead that went nowhere at first, but then another and another. Hospital records that had been altered. Adoption papers that didn't quite match up. A birth certificate with inconsistencies. Daniel felt his mouth go dry. "Mr. Thornton, what are you saying?" Richard opened the folder, revealing documents, photographs, and what appeared to be DNA test results. His eyes, now glistening with unshed tears, met Daniel's directly. "I'm saying that you are my son, Daniel. You are Alexander Thornton, taken from me 39 years ago. And I have proof." The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Daniel's mind reeled, rejecting the claim even as something deep within him trembled with recognition. The familiar feeling he'd experienced when first seeing Richard's face. The questions he'd always had about his adoption. The sealed records his parents had never fully explained. The sense, buried so deep he'd never acknowledged it, that something in his life story didn't quite add up. "That's impossible," Daniel whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. Richard slid the folder across the desk. "Look at the evidence. I'm not asking you to believe me on faith alone. You're a lawyer, you understand proof. It's all here. The DNA tests I had run when I finally tracked you down. The hospital records showing the irregularities. The photographs of my son, of you, taken in those first 3 days before you disappeared. With shaking hands, Daniel opened the folder. His eyes fell on a photograph. A newborn baby with a distinctive birthmark on his left shoulder, exactly like the one Daniel had carried his entire life. The one his adoptive parents had told him was unique and special. Daniel stared at the photograph until his vision blurred, his fingers trembling as they traced the edges of the faded image. The baby in the picture gazed up at the camera with wide, innocent eyes, completely unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. But it was the birthmark that held Daniel's attention. A distinctive crescent-shaped mark on the infant's left shoulder, identical to the one he had touched every day of his life while dressing, while showering, while existing in a body he had always assumed was his own. "This doesn't prove anything," Daniel said, but his voice cracked on the words. He was a lawyer, trained to find holes in evidence, to question everything, to never accept claims at face value. Yet even as he spoke, he could feel the foundation of his entire identity beginning to crack beneath him. Richard's expression was patient, understanding, as if he had anticipated every objection Daniel might raise. "Look at the next document," he said softly. "The DNA analysis. I used 3 independent laboratories to ensure accuracy. The probability of paternity is 99.97%. Daniel's hands moved mechanically through the papers, his legal training kicking in even as his emotional world collapsed. The DNA reports were thorough, professional, conducted by reputable laboratories he recognized. The methodology was sound, the chain of custody documented. He found himself searching desperately for errors, inconsistencies, anything that would allow him to dismiss this as an elaborate hoax or a terrible mistake. But there were no errors. "How did you get my DNA?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "A coffee cup," Richard admitted, looking slightly guilty. 3 months ago, I came to watch you in court. You were defending a single mother facing eviction. You left your coffee cup on the plaintiff's table during a recess. I know it seems invasive, perhaps even wrong, but I had to know. I had to be certain before I approached you. Daniel remembered that case. He had won, managing to negotiate a payment plan that kept the woman and her children in their home. It had been a good day, one of those days when his work felt meaningful and right. And all the while, this stranger had been watching him, collecting his DNA, preparing to detonate a bomb in the center of his life. "My parents," Daniel said suddenly, looking up at Richard with accusation in his eyes. "My adoptive parents, they're both dead now. They can't defend themselves against these accusations. Are you saying they kidnapped me? That they were criminals?" The pain that crossed Richard's face was immediate and genuine. "No," he said firmly. "From what I've been able to discover, your parents, the people who raised you, were victims too. The adoption was arranged through a lawyer named Gerald Whitmore, who has since been disbarred for multiple ethical violations, though nothing related to this case. He told your parents you were the child of a teenage mother who couldn't keep you. They paid substantial legal fees and believed everything was legitimate." Daniel felt tears burning behind his eyes. His mother, Margaret, had been the kindest woman he had ever known. His father, Thomas, had taught him about integrity and standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. The thought that they might have unknowingly participated in his abduction was almost more painful than the revelation itself. "They loved me," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "Everything they did because they thought they were giving a child a better life." "I know," Richard said, and there were tears now on his weathered cheeks. "I can see it in you, the values they instilled, the man they raised. They gave you what I couldn't, and I'm grateful for that, even as my heart breaks for all the years we lost." Daniel stood abruptly, walking to the window and staring out at the city below. People moved through their normal days, unaware that in this small office, a man's entire existence was being rewritten. Cars flowed through intersections, pedestrians crossed streets. The world continued its relentless march forward, while his own world stood perfectly still. "My wife," Daniel said suddenly, turning back to Richard. "My daughter. What am I supposed to tell them? That everything they know about me is a lie? That I'm not who they think I am. You're exactly who they think you are, Richard replied with surprising intensity. You're Daniel Morrison, a dedicated lawyer, a loving husband, a devoted father. Your name, your history, those things don't define who you've become. The man you are is the product of choices you've made, not the circumstances of your birth. But those circumstances were stolen, Daniel said, his anger finally breaking through the shock. Someone took me from you. Someone manipulated records, falsified documents, destroyed families. That's not just some abstract wrong. That's my life. Your life. My parents' lives. All of it built on a lie. Richard stood now, moving closer to Daniel but respecting his space. You're right, and that's why I came to you. Not just because you're my son. Though God knows I've dreamed of this moment for 39 years. I came because you're a lawyer who fights for justice. I came because I need your help to find out who did this and make them answer for it. Daniel turned to face him fully, seeing not just a stranger with a shocking claim, but a man who had suffered decades of unimaginable loss. He saw the lines etched deep around Richard's eyes, the gray in his hair that had probably come too early, the careful way he held himself as if afraid that too much emotion might shatter his composure completely. I have a life, Daniel said quietly. A family, cases that depend on me. I can't just drop everything and chase ghosts from 40 years ago. I'm not asking you to, Richard assured him. I'm asking you to look at the evidence. Talk to your wife. Take time to process this. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, help me find the truth. Not for revenge, but for closure. For both of us. Daniel looked down at the folder still open on his desk, at the photograph of the infant who wore his face, at the DNA results that couldn't be denied, at the carefully documented trail of deception that had shaped his entire existence. He thought of Jennifer, who would be devastated by this news. He thought of Emma, who would have questions he couldn't answer. He thought of the parents he had buried, who had taken their secrets to their graves. I need time, Daniel finally said. Of course, Richard replied, pulling a business card from his pocket and placing it on the desk. This has my personal number. Call me whenever you're ready, or if you never want to see me again, I'll understand. But Daniel, he paused, emotion thick in his voice. I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'm proud of the man you've become. Your parents did well by you. Richard moved toward the door, then stopped, looking back one more time. There's one more thing in that folder. A letter. Your mother, your biological mother, wrote it before she died 5 years ago. She never stopped hoping we'd find you. And then he was gone, leaving Daniel alone with evidence that would change everything, whether he wanted it to or not. Daniel sat motionless at his desk for what might have been minutes or hours. Time had lost all meaning in the wake of Richard Thornton's departure. The manila folder lay open before him like a portal to an alternate reality, one where his entire life had been built on foundations of sand. His hand hovered over the letter Richard had mentioned, the one written by a woman he had never known, a mother whose face existed only in his DNA. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive stationery that had yellowed slightly with age. His name, his birth name, was written across the front in elegant, feminine handwriting. To my beloved Alexander. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he carefully opened it. His fingers trembling so badly, he almost tore the delicate paper inside. The letter was dated December 2019, just 5 years ago, which meant this woman, his biological mother, had been alive recently, had been thinking of him, hoping for him, even as he lived his life completely unaware of her existence. My dearest Alexander. The letter began, and Daniel had to pause, overwhelmed by the intimacy of those words from a stranger. If you are reading this, it means Richard finally found you. It means my prayers, offered up every single day for 34 years, have been answered. I only wish I could be there to see your face, to hold you one more time, to tell you how profoundly sorry I am for every moment we lost. Daniel's vision blurred with tears, but he forced himself to continue reading, each word a knife to his heart. They took you from the hospital nursery while I slept, exhausted from bringing you into this world. When I woke and found you gone, I felt my soul being ripped from my body. The nurses said there must have been a mistake, that perhaps you had been taken for tests, but I knew, a mother knows, that something terrible had happened. By the time the police were called, precious hours had been lost. Hours that became days, then weeks, then years of agony. Your father and I never stopped searching. We hired investigators, followed every lead no matter how slim, never gave up hope even when everyone else told us to accept that you were gone forever. But the toll was devastating. Our marriage, which had been so full of love and promise, crumbled under the weight of our grief. We each blamed ourselves, and eventually, we couldn't look at each other without seeing the reflection of our failure to protect you. I want you to know that wherever you are, whoever raised you, I have never stopped loving you. I held you for 3 precious days before you were taken, and in that time you became the center of my universe. I memorized every detail of your face, your father's strong chin, my mother's nose, the way you would grip my finger with surprising strength, that crescent-shaped birthmark on your left shoulder that the nurses said looked like a moon watching over you. I'm dying now, Alexander. The doctors tell me I have perhaps 6 months, maybe less. The cancer has spread too far for treatment to do much good. I've accepted this, made my peace with it, but I cannot leave this world without trying one more time to reach you. I've given Richard every resource I have left, every contact, every piece of information that might help him find you. If he succeeds, if you're reading this, please know that you were wanted. You were loved. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone you reached without me, I was there in spirit, imagining what you might look like, what kind of person you were becoming. I like to think you grew up good and kind, that whoever raised you gave you the love and security that was stolen from us. I don't expect you to grieve for me. How can you mourn someone you never knew? But I hope you'll forgive me for not being there, even though the choice was never mine to make. And I hope you'll give your father a chance. He spent his life consumed by the search for you, perhaps to the detriment of everything else. He needs closure, needs to know that you're safe and happy, even if you can never be part of his life. All my love, now and always, Mom. Daniel's tears fell freely now, splashing onto the precious paper and smudging the ink slightly. He carefully set the letter down, afraid his shaking hands might damage it further. A woman he had never met had loved him with such fierce devotion that it had consumed her final thoughts. She had died hoping he might somehow know that he had been wanted, cherished, mourned. The door to his office burst open, and his secretary, Mrs. Patterson, appeared looking concerned. Mr. Morrison, are you all right? You missed your 10 o'clock with the Hendersons, and you have 3 messages from... She stopped abruptly, seeing his tear-stained face. Daniel, what's wrong? What happened? He couldn't speak, couldn't find words adequate to explain the earthquake that had just devastated his world. Instead, he gestured helplessly at the folder, at the evidence of a life stolen and a love that had never died. Mrs. Patterson, who had worked for him for 12 years and had become almost family, closed the door gently behind her and approached his desk. She glanced at the documents, her experienced eyes quickly taking in the DNA results, the photographs, the heartbreaking letter. "Oh, Daniel," she whispered, her own eyes filling with tears. "Oh, my dear boy. I don't know what to do," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I don't know who I am anymore. My parents, the people I called Mom and Dad, they never told me any of this. They let me believe the adoption was simple, straightforward. How do I reconcile the love they gave me with the fact that I was stolen from another family?" Mrs. Patterson pulled a chair around the desk to sit beside him, taking his hand in both of hers. "Your parents loved you, that much is clear. And from what I can see here, they may not have known the full truth themselves. People don't become criminals overnight, Daniel. They don't go from being good, decent folks to child traffickers. They were likely deceived, just as surely as this other family was destroyed. But what do I do now?" Daniel asked, looking at her with desperation. "How do I tell Jennifer? How do I explain this to Emma? How do I look at myself in the mirror knowing that my entire existence is built on someone else's tragedy?" "You do what you've always done," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "You face the truth head-on, no matter how painful. You're a man who built his career on seeking justice for others. Now you have to seek it for yourself, and for that man who came here today, and for the woman who wrote that letter." Daniel nodded slowly, knowing she was right but terrified of what that path might cost him. He looked at Richard's business card lying on his desk, at the phone number that represented a connection to a past he had never known existed. "I need to go home," he said finally. "I need to talk to Jennifer before I make any decisions." "Of course," Mrs. Patterson agreed, already gathering the scattered documents and carefully placing them back in the folder. "I'll reschedule your appointments and tell everyone you had a family emergency." Which, in a way, is exactly what this is. Daniel stood on unsteady legs, took the folder from her hands, and walked toward the door. As he reached it, he turned back to look at his office, at the life he had built, the career he had forged, the man he had believed himself to be. Everything looked the same, yet nothing would ever be the same again. "Mrs. Patterson," he said quietly. "Thank you." She nodded, understanding in her weathered face. "Whatever you need, Daniel. We're here for you." The drive home felt surreal, as if Daniel were moving through a dream where familiar streets and landmarks had taken on strange, alien qualities. He passed the park where he had taught Emma to ride a bike, the coffee shop where he and Jennifer had their first date, the courthouse where he had won his first case. All these memories, all these moments that defined who he was, were they still real if his very identity had been a lie? Jennifer Morrison was in the kitchen when Daniel arrived home, her hands covered in flour as she kneaded bread dough with practiced efficiency. It was Wednesday, her day off from the hospital where she worked as a pediatric nurse, and she always spent it baking, a therapeutic ritual she had maintained since their early years of marriage. The sight of her there, so familiar and normal, made Daniel's heart constrict painfully in his chest. She looked up as he entered, her warm smile fading immediately when she saw his face. "Daniel? What's wrong? Why are you home so early?" She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and moved toward him, concern etched across her features. "Are you sick? Did something happen?" Daniel set the manila folder on the kitchen table with trembling hands, unable to meet her eyes. 20 years of marriage had taught Jennifer to read his every mood, every gesture, and he could feel her alarm growing as she took in his tear-stained face, his disheveled appearance, the way he seemed to be holding himself together by sheer force of will. "Sit down," he said quietly. "Please, Jen, we need to talk." The color drained from Jennifer's face. In all their years together, he had never used that tone, the one that said their world was about to shift on its axis. She pulled out a chair and sat slowly, her eyes never leaving his face, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as if preparing for a blow. Daniel sat across from her, the folder between them like a barrier. For a long moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't find the words to begin dismantling the life they had built together. How do you tell your wife that the man she married isn't who she thought he was? That the history she knew, the family she had married into, was all built on lies and tragedy? "A man came to see me today," Daniel finally began, his voice rough with emotion. "His name is Richard Thornton. He's been searching for his son for 39 years. A son who was taken from a hospital nursery 3 days after birth." Jennifer's brow furrowed in confusion. "That's terrible, but I don't understand why." She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening as the implication hit her. "No, Daniel, no." He pushed the folder toward her with shaking hands. "He has proof. DNA tests from 3 independent laboratories, hospital records, photographs, a letter from his wife, from my biological mother, written before she died 5 years ago." Jennifer opened the folder with trembling fingers, her face growing paler with each document she examined. She lingered on the photograph of the infant, her nursing training immediately recognizing the distinctive birthmark, the one she had traced with her fingers countless times over the years. When she reached the letter, tears began streaming down her face. "Your parents," she whispered, looking up at him with anguish in her eyes. "Margaret and Thomas, did they know?" "Richard doesn't think so," Daniel said, his own tears flowing freely now. "He believes they were victims too, deceived by a corrupt lawyer who has since been disbarred. They paid for a legitimate adoption, believed they were helping a teenage mother. They had no idea they were part of a kidnapping." Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth, a sob escaping her throat. Oh God, Daniel. All those years, and they never knew. They died never knowing the truth about where you came from. The pain in her voice mirrored his own, and suddenly they were both standing, reaching for each other across the table, holding on as if they might drown in the tide of this revelation. Jennifer clung to him fiercely, her tears soaking into his shirt, her body shaking with the force of her grief. I don't know what to do, Daniel said into her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, grounding himself in the reality of her presence. I don't know who I am anymore. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about where I came from, it's all a lie. Jennifer pulled back enough to look at him, her hands framing his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Listen to me, she said with fierce intensity. You are Daniel Morrison. You are my husband. You are Emma's father. You are the man who stays up all night preparing cases for people who can't pay you. You are the person who cried at our wedding and when Emma was born. You are the same man you were this morning, yesterday, always. But I'm also Alexander Thornton, Daniel said, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. I'm the son of people I never knew, people who suffered for 39 years because of what happened to me. That man, Richard, he's my father. He has my eyes, Jen. When I looked at him, it was like looking at a version of myself 30 years from now. Jennifer guided him back to his chair, pulling hers close so their knees touched. She held both his hands in hers, grounding him with her touch. What does he want from you? He wants me to help him find out who did this, Daniel said. He wants justice, closure, and he wants... His voice broke. He wants a chance to know me, to be part of my life if I'll let him. And what do you want? Jennifer asked gently. Daniel looked down at their joined hands, at the wedding ring he had worn for 20 years, at the life they had built together. I want to pretend this never happened. I want to put that folder away and go back to how things were this morning. But I can't, can I? Now that I know, I can't just ignore it. No, Jennifer agreed softly. You can't, and you shouldn't. Daniel, this man, your father, he suffered unimaginably. And that woman, your mother, she died still hoping to find you. You can't turn your back on that, not and still be the man I know you are. But what about us? Daniel asked desperately. What about Emma? How do I tell our daughter that her grandparents, the people we named her middle name after, the people whose photos fill our house, might have unknowingly been part of something terrible? Jennifer's grip on his hands tightened. We tell her the truth, that Margaret and Thomas loved you with everything they had, that they were good people who were deceived, that sometimes terrible things happen, and innocent people get caught in the crossfire. Emma's strong, Daniel. She'll understand. Will she? Daniel asked, his voice breaking. She's only 22. She's supposed to be figuring out her career, her life. She doesn't need her father having an identity crisis. A man came to see me today, Daniel interrupted gently. His name is Richard Thornton. He's been searching for his son for 39 years. A son who was stolen from a hospital nursery. Emma's eyes widened, and Daniel watched as understanding began to dawn across her face. She was quick, his daughter brilliant and intuitive. She had inherited his analytical mind and her mother's empathetic heart, a combination that made her see connections others might miss. No, Emma whispered, shaking her head. Dad, no. You can't be. Daniel pushed the folder across the coffee table toward her. DNA results from 3 independent laboratories. Hospital records showing irregularities. Photographs. A letter from my biological mother. He paused, his voice breaking. I was taken, Emma. And the people who raised me, your grandparents, they had no idea. Emma's hands trembled as she opened the folder, her artist's eye immediately taking in every detail of the documents before her. She studied the photograph of the infant for a long time, noting the birthmark, the features that were unmistakably her father's. When she began reading the letter, tears started streaming down her face. Oh, Dad, she breathed, looking up at him with anguish written across her young face. This woman, your real mother, she loved you so much. She died hoping to find you. She's not my real mother, Daniel said reflexively, then stopped himself. I mean, she is biologically, but Margaret was my real mother in every way that matters. She raised me, loved me, shaped who I became. This woman, Elizabeth Thornton, she never got that chance. Emma wiped her tears away, her jaw setting with determination that reminded Daniel so much of himself at her age. So what are we going to do about it? This man, Richard, he's your father. My grandfather. We can't just ignore that. Jennifer smiled through her own tears at their daughter's immediate acceptance, her willingness to embrace this complicated truth. That's what we're trying to figure out, sweetheart. Your father is struggling with how to move forward. Why? Emma asked, looking directly at Daniel with those piercing eyes that had always seen straight through him. Dad, you've spent your entire life fighting for justice. You've told me 1,000 times that the truth matters, even when it's painful. How is this any different? Daniel felt his throat tighten at his daughter's words, at the way she threw his own principles back at him. It's different because this truth threatens everything I thought I knew about myself, about your grandparents, about where I came from. Emma set the folder down and moved to sit beside her father on the couch, taking his hand in hers. Do you remember what you told me when I found out that scholarship I got for art school had originally been intended for someone else? That they gave it to me because she turned it down? Daniel nodded, remembering that difficult conversation from 4 years ago. Emma had been devastated, feeling like she hadn't earned her place at the prestigious program. You told me that it didn't matter how the opportunity came to me, Emma continued. What mattered was what I did with it. You said that sometimes life gives us things in messy, complicated ways, but that doesn't make those things less valuable or real. That's not the same thing, Daniel protested weakly. Together, Emma echoed, adding her hand to theirs. With his family's support surrounding him like armor, Daniel dialed the number. Richard answered on the second ring, his voice rough with emotion and hope. Richard, Daniel said, his voice steadier than he felt. It's Daniel Morrison. I've looked at the evidence. I've talked to my family, and I'm ready to hear the rest of the story. I want to know what happened, and I want to help you find who did this. Richard Thornton arrived at Daniel's home the following evening, carrying a worn leather briefcase that looked like it had traveled through decades of searching. The November rain fell steadily outside, drumming against the windows as if the sky itself mourned the tragedy they were about to explore. Daniel opened the door to find Richard standing on the porch, his expensive coat darkened with rain, his face lined with exhaustion and anticipation. Thank you for inviting me, Richard said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I know this isn't easy for you. Daniel stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Come in. My wife Jennifer and daughter Emma are here. They wanted to meet you. Richard's hand trembled slightly as he removed his coat, hanging it carefully on the rack by the door. When he turned and saw Jennifer and Emma standing in the living room doorway, his breath caught audibly. His eyes moved between them, taking in the family portrait of what his son's life had become, and Daniel saw tears beginning to form. You have a beautiful family, Richard said, his voice breaking slightly. Elizabeth would have loved to see this, to know you found such happiness. Emma stepped forward first, her natural warmth overcoming any awkwardness. Mr. Thornton, she said, extending her hand. I'm Emma. I guess that makes me your granddaughter, though this is probably the strangest way anyone's ever gained a grandparent. Richard took her hand, then surprised them all by pulling her into a gentle embrace. Please call me Richard. And yes, this is certainly unconventional. He pulled back, studying her face with wonder. You have your father's eyes, and his smile. Jennifer approached next, her nurse's instinct to comfort others overriding any uncertainty. I'm Jennifer. Thank you for finding him, Richard. I can't imagine what these 39 years have been like for you. Every single day was agony, Richard admitted, accepting her handshake. But standing here now, seeing what kind of man he became, what kind of family he built, there's some comfort in knowing that despite everything, he had love. They settled in the living room, Richard in the armchair across from the couch where Daniel sat flanked by Jennifer and Emma. The briefcase rested on the coffee table between them like Pandora's box, waiting to release secrets that had been buried for nearly 4 decades. "I appreciate you all being here," Richard began, looking at each of them in turn. "What I'm about to share is the result of years of investigation, thousands of dollars spent on private detectives, and more heartbreak than I care to remember. But I know, that we're finally close to understanding what happened." Daniel leaned forward, his lawyer's mind already cataloging information, preparing to analyze evidence. "Start from the beginning. The night I was taken." Richard opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick file, its pages yellowed with age and marked with countless notes in the margins. "You were born on March 15, 1986, at St. Catherine's Hospital in Philadelphia. Your mother, Elizabeth, had a difficult labor, but you were healthy. Perfect. We spent 3 days in the hospital, the happiest days of our lives." He pulled out a photograph, sliding it across the table. Daniel picked it up, seeing for the first time an image of himself as a newborn, cradled in the arms of a young woman with dark hair and exhausted but radiant eyes. His biological mother, Elizabeth Thornton, who would spend the rest of her life searching for him. "On the 3rd night," Richard continued, his voice growing strained, "Elizabeth was sleeping. The nurses had given her something for pain, and she was deeply under. I had gone home to shower and change clothes, planning to return first thing in the morning to bring you both home." His hands clenched into fists. "That decision haunts me every day." "You couldn't have known?" Jennifer said gently, her professional experience with traumatized families evident in her tone. "No, but I should have stayed," Richard insisted. "When I returned at 7 the next morning, the nursery was in chaos. You were gone. The nurse who had been on duty couldn't explain it. She said she checked on you at 3 in the morning, and you were sleeping peacefully. By 6, when the shift changed, your bassinet was empty." Emma gasped softly, her hand finding Daniel's. "How is that possible? Don't hospitals have security?" "They did, but it was 1986, Richard explained bitterly. "Security cameras were expensive, not standard in every area. The nursery had one camera, but it had malfunctioned that night. The tape showed nothing but static for a 6-hour period." Daniel's lawyer instincts immediately caught on that detail. "That's not a coincidence. Someone knew about the camera, knew how to disable it. This was planned." "Exactly," Richard agreed, pulling out more documents. "The police investigated, of course, but they had little to go on. No witnesses, no footage, no clear motive. We weren't wealthy then. I was just starting my investment firm. Elizabeth was a teacher. There was no ransom demand. No obvious reason why someone would target us specifically." He spread several police reports across the table, each one stamped with dates stretching over years. "The case went cold within 6 months. The detective assigned to it told us that infant abductions usually fell into 2 categories. Someone who desperately wanted a baby and couldn't have one, or an organized trafficking operation. They believed you were taken by someone who wanted to raise you as their own." "My parents," Daniel said quietly, though the words felt strange on his tongue. "Margaret and Thomas Morrison. How did they become involved?" Richard pulled out another set of documents, these ones more recent. "This took decades to uncover. The adoption was arranged by Gerald Whitmore, a lawyer who operated in Philadelphia at the time. On paper, everything looked legitimate. He told your parents, the Morrisons, that you were the child of a 16-year-old girl who couldn't keep you. He provided false documentation, a fake birth certificate, adoption papers that appeared legal. But they weren't," Daniel said, his heart sinking as he thought of his parents unknowingly participating in this crime. The courthouse basement smelled of mildew and forgotten years, a tomb of paper and dust that stretched into shadows beyond the reach of flickering fluorescent lights. Daniel stood at the entrance, briefcase in hand, with Richard beside him and Emma trailing behind with her camera. She had insisted on documenting everything, creating a visual record of their investigation. It had taken Daniel 3 weeks of legal maneuvering, calling in favors from judges and clerks he had worked with over the years, to gain access to Gerald Whitmore's seized files. The boxes had been stored here since 1998, 27 years of neglect leaving them water-stained and disorganized. A bureaucratic nightmare that no one had bothered to sort through properly. "There must be 50 boxes here," Emma said, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. She raised her camera, capturing the rows of cardboard containers stacked haphazardly on metal shelves. "How are we supposed to find anything specific in all this?" "The same way I win cases," Daniel replied, setting his briefcase down and rolling up his sleeves. "One document at a time with patience and attention to detail. Richard, you take the boxes labeled 1985 to 1987. Emma, start with anything marked financial records. I'll focus on correspondence and client files." They worked in methodical silence for hours, broken only by the sound of cardboard scraping against concrete as they pulled down boxes, the rustle of papers, and occasional sneezes from the accumulated dust. Daniel's back ached from bending over boxes, his hands black with grime, but he pushed through the discomfort, driven by a need for answers that had consumed him since Richard first walked into his office. Around noon, Emma gasped suddenly, holding up a folder with trembling hands. "Dad, look at this." Daniel and Richard rushed to her side, peering at the documents she had discovered. It was a ledger similar to the one Richard had shown them but more detailed, listing names, dates, and amounts. Daniel's eyes scanned the entries, his heart racing as he recognized the pattern. "These are all adoptions," he said, his voice tight. "Look at the amounts, they're all between $40,000 and $60,000, astronomical fees for adoption in the 80s. And here," he pointed to a column of numbers. "These are payouts. Smaller amounts, 20 to 30,000, going to various payees." Richard leaned in closer, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he examined the entries. "There's Reynolds again. Dr. C. Reynolds 3 times in 1986 alone. And look here, Dr. M. Patterson appears twice. Nurse S. Williams once. This wasn't just one corrupt doctor, Daniel. This was a network." The implications hit Daniel like a physical blow. His abduction hadn't been an isolated incident, a tragic anomaly. It was part of a systematic operation, multiple hospital staff members working with Whitmore to steal babies and sell them to desperate couples willing to pay premium prices for a clean, untraceable adoption. "How many?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How many babies were stolen?" Daniel counted the entries, his stomach churning with each name. In this ledger alone, covering just 1985 to 1987, there are 23 transactions, 23 families destroyed, 23 children who never knew the truth about where they came from. Richard sank into a nearby chair, his face ashen. "All those years, I thought what happened to us was unique, that we were somehow targeted specifically. But we weren't. We were just unlucky enough to have a baby in a hospital where predators were operating freely." Daniel photographed every page of the ledger with his phone, ensuring they had digital backups of this crucial evidence. As he worked, his mind raced through the legal implications. Most of the doctors and nurses listed would be elderly now, possibly deceased. Whitmore was gone, but surely some of them were still alive, still walking free, never having faced justice for the lives they destroyed. "We need to cross-reference these names with hospital records," Daniel said, his lawyer's mind already building a case. "Find out who's still alive, where they are now, and we need to try to identify the other families affected. If we can find even one other person who was stolen and adopted through Whitmore, it strengthens the pattern, makes this undeniable." "How do we do that without violating privacy laws?" Emma asked practically. "We can't just call random people and ask if they were kidnapped as infants." Richard stood, renewed determination in his eyes despite his obvious exhaustion. "We start with the families who were reported as missing their children. In 1986, there weren't as many resources for parents whose babies disappeared, but there were support groups, networks of grieving families who tried to help each other. Elizabeth and I were part of one. Some of those parents might still be searchable. And the adoptive families," Daniel added, though the words pained him. "People like the Morrisons who thought they were doing something good, who were deceived into participating in a crime. If we can find others who used Whitmore, who paid similar fees, we might be able to warn them, help them understand what really happened. They continued searching through the afternoon, finding more evidence of Whitmore's operation. There were fake birth certificates, expertly forged documents that would have fooled anyone without forensic analysis. There were letters from desperate couples, begging for help in their quest to have a child, their vulnerability and hope painfully evident in every word. And there were receipts, bank statements, proof of money changing hands in amounts that made Daniel's stomach turn. As the winter sun began to set, casting long shadows through the basement's narrow windows, Emma pulled out another box from the back of the shelves. This one was different from the others, marked simply personal. Do not file. Dad, Richard, come look at this, she called, her voice strange. Inside the box were photographs, dozens of them, Polaroids taken in what appeared to be hospital nurseries. Babies sleeping peacefully in their bassinets, completely unaware that they were being cataloged like merchandise. On the back of each photo were notations, dates, physical descriptions, and in some cases, question marks followed by dollar amounts. Daniel picked up one photo, his hands shaking. The baby in the image had a crescent-shaped birthmark on its left shoulder. On the back, in Whitmore's handwriting, were the words, March 18, 1986. Male. Healthy. Strong features. TM. $50K confirmed. That's you, Richard breathed, looking over Daniel's shoulder. That's you 3 days after you were born, being assessed like property. The rage that swept through Daniel was unlike anything he had ever felt. His entire career had been built on fighting for justice, defending the innocent, standing up against those who would abuse their power. But this was personal in a way that transcended professional outrage. He was looking at evidence of his own commodification, proof that his life had been stolen and sold for profit. We're taking all of this to the authorities, Daniel said, his voice hard with controlled fury. We're filing a formal complaint, demanding a reopened investigation into Whitmore's operations. And we're going to find every single person involved in this network and make them answer for what they did. It's been almost 40 years, Richard said quietly. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to kidnapping in Pennsylvania, Daniel interrupted. There is no time limit on prosecuting child abduction. And conspiracy charges, fraud, corruption, we have options. These people thought they got away with it, that time would protect them. But I'm going to prove them wrong. Emma carefully packed all the evidence they had found, creating an inventory as she went, her organizational skills invaluable as they prepared to present their findings. As they finally left the courthouse, carrying boxes of documents that represented dozens of shattered families, Daniel felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This was bigger than his own story now. This was about justice for all those other babies, all those other parents who never got answers. And he was going to make sure that, even decades later, the truth would finally come to light. Richard placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder as they loaded the boxes into Daniel's car. Thank you, he said simply, for not walking away, for fighting not just for us, but for all of them. Daniel met his biological father's eyes, seeing reflected there the same determination, the same hunger for justice that had driven his entire career. This is what I do, he said. I fight for people who can't fight for themselves. It's just taken me 39 years to realize I'm one of them. 6 months had passed since Daniel first walked into that courthouse basement. 6 months of relentless investigation that had consumed his every waking hour. The conference room at the Philadelphia District Attorney's office was packed with people whose lives had been irrevocably changed by Gerald Whitmore's criminal network. Parents who had lost children, adults who had discovered they were stolen, and law enforcement officials determined to finally bring justice to a decades-old conspiracy. Daniel stood at the front of the room, a presentation displayed on the screen behind him showing the intricate web of corruption they had uncovered. His voice was steady, professional, but those who knew him well could hear the emotion barely contained beneath the surface. What we've discovered, Daniel began, is that between 1984 and 1988, Gerald Whitmore facilitated at least 37 illegal adoptions in the Philadelphia area. He worked with a network of hospital staff members who identified vulnerable targets, new mothers who were heavily medicated, families without extensive support systems, situations where a baby could disappear without immediate alarm. He clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of the conspirators. Dr. Charles Reynolds, Dr. Margaret Patterson, Nurse Sarah Williams, and at least 4 other medical professionals participated in these kidnappings. They were paid between $20,000 and $35,000 per baby, while Whitmore charged adoptive families $40,000 to $60,000, pocketing the difference. A woman in the front row, gray-haired and frail, raised her hand with trembling fingers. Daniel recognized her from his research. Linda Chen, whose daughter had disappeared from a hospital nursery in 1985. What happened to the hospital administrators? Didn't anyone notice what was happening? That's what makes this particularly insidious, Daniel replied, his jaw tightening. St. Catherine's Hospital had high turnover in administration during those years. The medical staff involved were careful, spacing out their crimes to avoid pattern recognition. And when families reported missing babies, the investigations were often cursory. It was the mid-80s, hospitals didn't have the security protocols we have today. Richard sat in the second row, his face a mask of controlled emotion as Daniel presented the evidence they had spent months compiling. Beside him sat 3 other elderly parents who had never stopped searching for their stolen children, their hope rekindled by Daniel's investigation. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Martinez stood to address the room. Thanks to Mr. Morrison's exhaustive work, we've been able to identify and locate 8 individuals who were victims of this network. 5 have been successfully reunited with their biological families. 3 others have chosen not to pursue contact, which is their right, and we respect that decision. Emma, sitting near the back with her camera, had documented every reunion, capturing the moment when families torn apart by greed were finally made whole. She had cried behind her lens watching a 60-year-old woman meet her 78-year-old mother for the first time in conscious memory, both of them sobbing as they held each other, trying to bridge decades of stolen time. "What about prosecution?" asked a man in a suit, a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer who had been covering the story extensively. "You said most of the conspirators are dead, but surely some are still alive?" Daniel nodded grimly. Dr. Margaret Patterson is alive, currently 82 years old and living in a retirement community in Arizona. Nurse Sarah Williams is 79 and resides in Florida. We've also identified a hospital administrator, Robert Kelly, who we believe facilitated the conspirators' access and helped cover up irregularities. He's 74 and living in Maine. The district attorney's office has filed charges against all 3, Martinez announced: kidnapping, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice. Given their ages and health conditions, we're not expecting lengthy prison sentences, but we are determined to see them answer for their crimes in a court of law. A murmur ran through the room, a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. Justice delayed was still justice, but for the families who had suffered for decades, no punishment could truly compensate for what had been taken from them. An older man stood slowly, his weathered hands gripping a cane for support. Daniel recognized him from photographs: James Wheeler, whose son had vanished in 1986, just 2 months before Daniel's abduction. "My boy would be 39 now," he said, his voice cracking. "I've looked at the evidence and I don't see his name on your list of people who've been found. Does that mean he's still out there somewhere, living a life under a false identity? Or does it mean something worse happened to him?" Daniel felt his heart break for this man, for the uncertainty that was somehow worse than confirmed tragedy. "Mr. Wheeler, I wish I could give you a definitive answer. Not every baby stolen by this network went through Whitmore's documented adoptions. Some may have been placed through other channels. Some records may have been destroyed. We're still investigating, still searching. I promise you, we haven't given up." James Wheeler nodded, tears streaming down his face, and sat back down. The woman beside him, his wife, Daniel assumed, took his hand, and they clung to each other, united in their endless grief. Richard stood then, drawing all eyes to him. "I want to say something, if I may." He looked around the room, his gaze settling on each face, seeing in them reflections of his own decades of pain. "For 39 years, I searched for my son. I spent millions of dollars, destroyed my marriage, lost my health to stress and grief. When I finally found him, I expected that moment to heal everything, to make all the suffering worthwhile." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "But what I've learned is that finding Daniel, finding Alexander, was just the beginning. The real healing came from this." He gestured around the room. "From turning our private tragedy into something that could help others. From making sure that the people who did this can't hide anymore, can't pretend they didn't destroy lives for profit." Richard's eyes found Daniel, and the connection between them was palpable. A bond forged not just by blood, but by shared purpose. "My son could have walked away. He could have kept this private, dealt with it quietly, and gone back to his comfortable life. Instead, he chose to fight not just for me, not just for himself, but for every family in this room and every family we haven't found yet. That's the man the Morrisons raised, and I'm proud to call him my son." The room erupted in applause, and Daniel felt tears he had been holding back finally break free. He saw Jennifer in the audience, Emma beside her, both of them beaming with pride and love. He saw the faces of parents who had suffered as Richard had, saw the gratitude in their eyes, and understood that this was why he had become a lawyer. Not for the cases he won or lost, but for moments like this when justice, however delayed, finally prevailed. After the presentation ended, people lined up to speak with Daniel, to thank him, to share their own stories. An elderly woman pressed a photograph into his hands. Her grandson, she said, who had been stolen and was now somewhere living a lie. A middle-aged man, tears in his eyes, explained that he had always felt out of place in his adoptive family and was now requesting DNA testing to see if he might be one of Whitmore's victims. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Richard approached Daniel, and for a moment, they simply stood facing each other, two men bound by tragedy and redemption. Then Richard pulled Daniel into an embrace, holding him tight, and Daniel let himself be held by his father, one of his fathers, accepting that he was lucky enough to have been loved by two sets of parents, even if the circumstances that led to that love were born of crime and loss. "Thank you," Richard whispered. "Thank you for giving my life purpose again." "Thank you for finding me," Daniel replied. "For never giving up. For loving me even when I was just a ghost." They stood there as the conference room emptied around them, father and son, finally together after 39 years, knowing that the road ahead would still be difficult, that court proceedings and revelations and confrontations with the guilty still awaited them. But they would face it together, along with Jennifer and Emma and all the families who had found each other again through Daniel's relentless pursuit of truth. Justice, Daniel thought, wasn't always swift. But when it finally arrived, it brought with it a kind of healing that made even the longest wait worthwhile. Daniel Morrison's journey reminds us that truth, no matter how painful, is always worth pursuing. He could have rejected Richard's evidence, could have protected himself from the devastating revelation that his entire identity was built on a crime. But he chose courage over comfort, justice over denial. His story forces us to confront difficult questions. What defines who we are? Is it the blood that runs through our veins, or the values instilled in us by those who raised us? Can we honor the memory of parents who loved us while also acknowledging the parents who never stopped searching? Daniel discovered that identity isn't singular. It's layered, complex, and capable of holding multiple truths at once. What would you have done in Daniel's place? Would you have had the strength to face a past that threatened everything you believed about yourself? Would you have fought not just for your own closure, but for dozens of other families still living with unanswered questions? This story isn't just about one man finding his biological father. It's about the power of truth to heal wounds that have festered for decades, about the courage it takes to confront systems of injustice, and about the remarkable capacity of the human heart to expand and make room for love in all its complicated forms. Sometimes the families we're born into and the families we're raised by can coexist, each valid, each precious, each part of who we become. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and follow our channel for more powerful stories about justice, family, and the unbreakable human spirit. Leave a comment telling us what you would have done in Daniel's situation. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these important stories to light.